Hi, it's Dennis Daly. I was saddened today to hear of the death of Shirley Coles, a longtime legendary entertainer who spent her final years here in the Palm Springs area. So let's go back into the archives for one of my American montage programs I did, speaking to Shirley. Hi, it's Dennis Daly. What's it like to have spent your life in entertainment, even being an understudy for Ethel Merman, but have to work those silly hours? Just ask Shirley Coles. That description fits her to a T.
You're in a different world. When you're ready to party after you're through work, everybody else is in bed. And you sleep most of the day to get yourself up for in the evening. It's a different world.
Shirley Coles, who says she may not have ever reached the pinnacle of success in entertainment, but she could see the pinnacle from where she was. On this week's American Montage. I first met Shirley Coles when she was unofficially entertaining. You know, a lot of performers have friends who are performers, and when they wander in, they ask them to perform also. But Shirley, in her near-retirement years, is doing more than that. She is giving us all a perspective on what the golden age of entertainment was like. A very, very talented woman. I asked her where she grew up.
Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
It's one of my favorite cities. There used to be, I don't know whether it's still there or not, a German restaurant called Mader's.
Oh, it was there. It's still, I think it's still there. I haven't been back in many years, but yes.
It's funny, I did a show there one time, and the chef, believe it or not, at this German restaurant was from Ireland.
Oh, boy.
But he had married into the family, so they... Milwaukee, I don't know much about the creative juices in Milwaukee, but you were very close to Chicago, which over the years has been huge in radio and theater.
Mm-hmm. Well, I won the state championship of Wisconsin in let's say I was 14 years old, whatever year that was.
In singing?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So then I had a teacher at high school who had a band. And the bars were away from where the bands played, so I could go and sing with them at the Eagles Ballroom and some of the other nightclubs that were around.
You know, a lot of your really famous entertainers started out in social clubs, Moose Lodge, Elks, American Legion, that kind of thing. And then in major cities, a lot of the black performers, of course, started out in churches.
Of course.
That was where they cut their teeth. What kind of music were you doing in high school?
Oh, well, my mother bids me bind my hair with bands of rosy hue, you know, all that.
I haven't heard that one.
No, well, I was a coloratura soprano, and you had to do all those lyric things to get into the competition.
You know, one of the things we could talk about that I, as someone who loves music, may know that a lot of casual listeners might not know, is that when you discover where your voice is, and I have a high tenor voice, but it has no power at all. It's very light tenor voice. There are certain types of songs that showcase your voice the best. So they wanted you to use those fancy, with jumping up to the high notes and that kind of thing.
Haven't done those in years.
So that was high school. What happened after you graduated?
Then the Florentine Opera Company wanted me to go into opera. But after I found out that I had to learn languages, and it took them 6 months to teach me one aria in Italian, I thought, no, this isn't for me.
This would take the rest of your life just to learn one opera.
Right. So then I went to New York, and let's see, did I work for the mafia? No, I went to New York.
Did you say mafia?
Oh, I did. I did work.
We must talk about that, but go ahead. You went to New York, and then what happened?
And then I became Ethel Merman's understudy. She hated me.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Did she hate everybody?
Well, she said to them one day, she's never going on, so you can get rid of her. And she meant that, because I think I was better than her, but she did have a charisma. And either you loved her or you hated her, but most people I found hated her.
Well, you know, a lot of those over-the-top performers were like that. I know Anthony Newley, whom the only Broadway musical I ever saw on Broadway was The Roar of the Grease Paint, The Smell of the Crowd. I was in New York in high school. Newley had an odd way of singing, yet in many ways he was one of the best male cabaret performers in his career. But again, you mention Anthony Newley to people and they either go, oh, wow, or they go, ugh. So, but a lot of people went, ugh, for Ethel Merman, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Well, now, explain...
She was always flat. You know, she was never on key.
Explain to us, if you will, what the role, I know it sounds simplistic, but what the role of an understudy is and how that all works. I mean, are you standing there all night, always
That's the whole
waiting?
thing. You know, in those days, the understudy just was there for the star. And if she went on the second act, you could leave. And I used to go over the Waldorf Astoria and sing with the 4 freshmen, or else I'd go down to the club, what was the one down there? Copacabana. And there was always places, after you get known and you work in a circle, I'd always get up and sing and carry on.
So it's kind of a jam session in a way with all the good performers. That's interesting. You don't have to wait for the whole show. You assume that if Ethel Merman was well enough to go on, after a while she's going to last the whole performance that night. And I guess if she would fall and break a leg in Act 2, they would cancel the rest of the performance.
Probably, because the audience would be horrified to see that. So,
how do you apply to be an understudy?
You know, it was so long ago. I went to some auditions. And I had black hair at that time, looked very much like her, short, and so I must have won out on the auditions, and that was how they asked me to come.
Now, did you get a lot of rehearsals, or is it just watching the performance night after night?
You sing along in the background, you know, not where she can hear you, to make sure you know what you're doing, and. But, like I said, she's never going on, and I never... One night she was sick, and I thought, she said, no, I'll go. She did.
Do you think, and maybe I shouldn't ask this, that it was more her own ego rather than disliking you personally?
Well, I think she was paranoid that somebody might take her place. You know.
I always thought of Ethel Merman as being a little one-dimensional in a ways, that there were certainly only a few roles that were right for her because she was so over the top.
Oh, but she was in Annie Get Your Gun, Call Me Madam, Gypsy. You know, she had some good roles and she stayed on. And I have to tell you, when she walked out on stage, she had a charisma. I don't know what it was. I didn't ever think it was her singing, but... she had a charisma.
Well, you know, Red Skelton was like that. He was from the town where I worked in Indiana for 10 years, I'm sorry. And everybody there thought he was a saint. And on his radio show, he used to mention Vincennes, Indiana a lot. So there was a great pride. And he would sometimes sneak back to town and they'd see him at McDonald's. I mean, he never made a big deal about it. I never met him until I interviewed him in Washington, D.C., and there was almost an electricity coming off of him.
Yes, they have a charisma. There's just something there.
It was a palpable kind of feeling. How long were you in that understudy position?
Oh, maybe 9 months was about all I could take of it. And maybe a year, but...
Isn't it kind of hard on your ego? And I don't mean to go overboard on this, but every artist, like me, I admit I like to hear my own voice. But if you're a performer, after a while, I would think you would say, gosh darn, I want to perform.
Well, that was it. So finally, then I met up with a trio, and we went down and opened the Fountain Blue.
In Miami?
In Miami. And we were there for about 4 or 5 months, and then Martha Ray came in one night and said to me, why don't you come and work for me at the 5 o'clock club? So I did. She was something else to work for. She was with Tony Marciano at that time, and she was so jealous of him.
Really?
Oh, yeah. One of the strip girls and him got together. She's out of here today. And that was that.
Well, you know, it's funny. When you said his name, it reminded me of Muzzy Marcelino, who was a band leader and a whistler. And my mother just had the hots for Muzzy Marcelino. Even in her later years, she would occasionally say, I wonder whatever happened to Muzzy Marcelino. Yeah. Was Miami a good venue to play?
At that time it was.
This would have been what era?
Oh, God, 1950.
Mid-late 50s? Or
no,
early
even
50s?
55, 56.
Mid-50s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I worked, and then B. Morley came and said to me, because she knew I was unhappy at the other one, she said, why don't we open the mousetraps? So her and I opened 3 mousetraps, one in Miami, one in Georgia, and one in up north, further in...
the Carolinas?
No. It was in Florida, but up further, the
Orlando?
other side. Orlando. Yeah. We were there. And then the Mafia picked me up, and I went back to Chicago.
You know, it's interesting because I lived in Vegas for a while, and there was always that thing that when you talked about the history of Vegas, somebody eventually would bring up the Mafia.
Of course, it was opened by the Mafia.
And they said that the Mafia era was the most generous era for the locals. You got comps, and you felt like family if you were, on their good side. Yes,
as long as you kept your mouth shut and did what they told you, you were well taken care of. So then I opened, then I was at the Villa Venice, Magnum Chateau, Chez Paris, and the Palmer House.
Ah, there is a building with a tradition.
Yes, yes.
I know growing up in southern Indiana, I listened to a lot of Chicago radio, and then the first radio station I worked for was an ABC affiliate, and Don McNeil's Breakfast Club was still on.
Oh, yes.
And I remember at that time they were in the Hotel Allerton, the Clouds room of the Hotel Allerton, but they had been at the Palmer House, I think, forever years. Almost. Yeah. Chicago, as we had said before, is a good city.
Oh, yes. I did a lot of work there and was there for about 5-6 years. Then they sent me to Vegas, and I opened the Fremont Hotel.
Ah.
Then they finally sent me out here to California, and I opened for the Ballesteri brothers, the Cockatoo.
And that was where?
That's on Hawthorne and La Brea.
In Los Angeles?
In Los Angeles.
Yes, okay.
Once I got out here, I thought, oh my God, I don't ever want to leave. I kind of got out of the business. I always did it weekends, and I went and got my real estate license, and I worked in that. By then, how old was I then?
39.
No, I wish. 59. And so I worked a lot of clubs, the Iron Horse, but they didn't last long out here at that time. And then I met Rudy at the Little Shrimp. Oh, I had to go back east one more time, did some work. I worked for the Bashuni brothers, too, in Milwaukee that owned the Lamppost. I was there for years.
It's interesting, and I don't know whether a lot of people have thought about this, but I traveled a lot for about 10 years as a travel writer, doing a show very similar to this from various different places. And I'm not a bar person, but you get to know what's out there. And it amazed me. I'd go back to Memphis a year later, and all the bars had different names. And different clientele. It's just, it must be that whole nightclub bar thing that nothing stays the same very long.
Well, I was at the Lamppost for about 5 years, and I think John still owned it when I left.
Well, there are some exceptions, but most of your neighborhood establishments really they're like revolving doors. Now, what kind of material were you doing then? I must tell the audience that you're a performer with a great deal of power in your voice and a twinkle in your eye who likes to do a little baudy material.
Oh, I used to.
Were you always doing that?
I was always doing that.
Now, you do a song, and I can't have you sing it here. It's called In My Little Red Book.
I'm not doing that.
It consists of baudy, sometimes X-rated limericks. Rusty Warren
wrote that when we were working together. And since then I've changed it a lot because you have to go with the times. And so I mix them up. And some are limericks now that they put in a book.
Yeah.
But otherwise, that's how it started.
Why don't we, for the younger audience, explain Rusty Warren? How would you encapsulate that performer? I first saw Rusty Warren on some of those early 33 1/3 records that were played at parties.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But she was a broadie, but when I met her, we were working in Chicago at the County Casino on Clark and Madison. And she did the comedy. There was 3 of us singers, and she did the comedy. And on Monday and Tuesday, her and I worked together. She was my piano player.
Wow.
She was a piano player. She's really an excellent pianist.
I wouldn't have thought that.
Oh, yes. Concert pianist.
Wow.
And so then that's when we kind of started talking. She used to chase all the girls around, you know, she was gay at that time. But she wore her hair in a back straight in a red bun, looked old, much older than she was. And then after she left, where did I go from there? I can't think, but we both went separate ways. And the next time I saw her, she had this flaming red hair, and she was in Vegas. Yeah.
But she very quickly got an international reputation as the kind of person you'd invite to a very expensive bachelor party. Yeah. I think that, to me, and I'm very liberal in some ways and very conservative in another, the one thing about Vegas, and you know, they have the slogan there, what happens in Vegas stays there. That's been true a long time.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Now, you say you went into real estate. It's interesting that a lot of performers did that when their careers changed. I know a very good example is Donna Douglas, who played Ellie Mae on the Beverly Hillbillies, became a very well-known Los Angeles real estate agent. And that was her second career. Because a lot of actresses and actors who get stereotyped in a role really can't go back. That's the problem.
Yeah, and it's an easy field for an entertainer because your nights are free, so you can still sing, and you work during the day, so it made it convenient.
Did you go through a period of time when you weren't performing that you worried about losing your edge? Because I know me in that if I don't sing even in the shower, I lose what vocalization I have very quickly. But you have a much more powerful voice than just about anybody I know, which made you perfect to understudy for Ethel Merman.
I guess I was just God-given a gift. My grandma, I can remember, I must have got it from her, because I'd come home from school and I could hear her a block and a half away singing Rock of Ages. So I think I got it from her. And it's never been a problem.
Let's talk about music.
Okay.
I really, my heart aches for people who are not into music.
Oh, definitely.
Now, we could talk, and I guess every generation thinks the next one's going to hell in a handbasket, but I don't think the majority of young kids anymore have ever heard a melody. You know, and I was explaining all the things you are to somebody one day who had elementary piano, and I said, you know, the fun is on the black notes. Because that melody, da 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 dum, you go down off into that, and all of this chanting, which is all music you hear anymore, is that wonderful ability to soak in a melody, and then if you're a performer, make it your own, is something that's kind of a treasure in a way, I think. How you must have known fairly early, since you said you won an award at 14, that you liked music.
Oh, they say, my uncles used to say I was 3 years old, and we used to go to Michigan every summer to my aunts and uncle's farmhouse up there. And I used to stand for hours behind my uncle while he was driving, singing. And my grandma used to say, he makes the worst faces, but he loves you, honey. It's okay.
I can just picture you as a child doing that. Now, did you have much formal training? It's all pretty natural for you. Because now there are people, you know, who don't have much talent, who spend years and years in training.
Yes.
You either have it or you don't.
I think so.
Well, you know, in broadcasting, we used to joke that there used to be all these schools. Of course, now there's so little radio anymore, nobody wants to go into broadcasting, but there were these schools you could go to learn to be an announcer. And I said, you know, you either come with it and leave with it, or you don't have it.
Right.
And I know when I was at Indiana University, there were a couple of students there that I said to myself, how can the professor spend time trying to help this poor guy become an announcer because he couldn't even say his name?
Well,
when you were in high school and they began to realize your talents, did you have much help from many of the teachers?
yeah, Mrs. Landmark was one of my big promoters. She's the one who made me go to the championships for, and I can't think of the guy's name I used to sing with, but it was funny because Myron Florin was his. Yes. He was one of his performers when we were at the Eagles, and later he went with Lawrence Welk.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think I've always been lucky, but I don't think it was my destiny to be a star. You just go through the bottom part. And
you don't feel you've succeeded?
not to the extent, when we came up, records were very expensive to make.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I doubled for Patti Page when the tape broke down one time at the Riverside Theater, and I did the top part. She did the harmony because wasn't ready for the harmony,
mm-hmm.
and but it cost a lot of money back in those days to make a demo and get it promoted. And K-Star, I knew most of them, but they were and they slept their way to the top. I was not going to do that.
Yeah, the thing that young people don't realize today is how when everything was on 78s,
mm-hmm.
there were really only 4 big companies that controlled all of the
Yes.
record manufacturing in the country. And it was only after World War II and into the 50s when they came out with the 45
mm-hmm.
that little small record companies could press one cut. Some of them didn't put anything on the backside.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had people such as Sam Phillips, who started Sun Records
mm-hmm.
in Memphis and discovered Elvis before RCA snapped him up. It was a whole new ballgame for
Mm-hmm.
performers once making records became less expensive and once the big 4 didn't control the markets
Right.
anymore.
Right.
Then you had the independents. Did you ever see the movie about Loretta Lynn, coal miner's daughter?
Oh, yes.
Because she and her husband are going from radio station to radio
of course,
station,
that's what you had to do.
hawking her record. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they would look for the towers in the distance.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about, you said you came to California and you said, I want to stay here.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived not a lot of places. I spent the first 30 years of my life in Indiana, then 20 years in D.C., then L.A. and Vegas and elsewhere, and finally Palm Springs. I moved west because almost all my friends in D.C. were gone, and one winter I did about $30,000 damage to my left leg. And when I'm lying in this puddle of ice water, I said, the next time there's an opening in our Los Angeles bureau, I'm moving. I don't regret coming west at all.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And I think I do not think I would feel this good at my age if I lived in an area where it still snowed.
Oh, of course. I mean, I'm so addicted now to this weather. I love the summers even.
Even though some people would say they're brutally hot. It was funny. I remember one night it got down to 70. It felt chilly, where if I were back in Indiana, that would be warm in the fall.
But our blood thins out here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Shirley, of all the places you worked during the peak of your career, which of those days would you like to relive? It's kind of a variation on the old theme, if you could have one night over. But let's not talk about night. Let's talk about a year or a couple of months. Or maybe 2 different places you worked that you really would like to magically go back to.
Showbiz is not an easy profession. You're in a different world. When you're ready to party after you're through work, everybody else is in bed. And you sleep most of the day to get yourself up for in the evening. So it's a different world, and I have to think about that.
Well, while you're thinking, let me bring up the other aspect you talked about. Having been in radio all my life, I understand that the show must go on, that type of thing. And I'm not playing the pity card here, but I've done newscasts in which I had a migraine headache so bad I couldn't read what I was looking at. But that is tough on your system. I know I worked overnights a very long time, and I think it took years off my age because I don't think the human body is meant to be up all night and sleep all day. But how else are you going to do it?
That's the way you have to.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to think what I would like to do over again. Gee, I worked for the Mafia up in Hayward, Wisconsin with Gilda Gray's son. He had a trio, the Marty Gray Trio. They were with me for a long time. That was fun. That was a fun time. I was there almost a year or two.
You know, there were so many of those groups, and I'm thinking, of course, of the ones that were on all those radio shows. They were usually 4 guys and a girl, and it was that perfect kind of sound. It's like the high-lows without a female voice. And I don't know why I'm groping for some of the names, but they were very big, performing with Bob Hope, and you heard them on a lot of radio shows in the 40s and 50s. A lot of the Glenn Miller music had them. That is kind of a magic blend, the quartet, and then adding that high female voice to it.
Well, look at Doris Day. That's how she got her start, with Tommy Dorsey. So you have to be at the right place at the right time. And like I said, I don't think it was my destiny to really hit the top. But I've had a good life, had a hell of a good time, and that's all you can ask for.
We are spending this time around talking to Shirley Coles, who is well known as a singer in Southern California. Even though she claims the better part of her career was in the past, she still shows up and sits in with a lot of groups in that part of the country. She was an understudy once for Ethel Merman on Broadway and has appeared in hundreds of clubs around the country. Shirley grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and won an award in high school in a singing contest. She then, as a lot of people do, migrated to New York City. Finally, she was selected to be Ethel Merman's understudy on Broadway. But Ethel Merman never got sick, and standing in the wings night after night can get pretty old. So she started singing in nightclubs around the country and met some pretty fabulous people. Now, in her later years, Shirley shows up to sing every so often in Southern California when a friend plays piano, or she knows they'll let her in. I happened to have a microphone handy one night when in Palm Springs, California, she was asked to sing.
God bless America, land that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairie to the ocean, white with fog. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Shirley Coles can really belt 'em out. For my money, Shirley doesn't perform enough anymore. She's a genuine spark plug when it comes to music, and I've enjoyed the discussion we've had so far about her career. But I told her I found out that she and legendary piano player Rudy Delamore get together once a week, not to do music, but to play Uno. I asked her if she was an Uno fanatic.
No, Rudy's the one that gets us in, and so now we play once a week, and we have a fun time.
Let's explain Rudy. Rudy Delamore is 70, in his early 70s.
72.
And he was a classically trained child pianist in high school, one of the best in America, I guess. And he has moved on to be one of the best-known gay cabaret performers in the U.S., and we have him as a mutual friend. He also owes a lot to Martha Raye, and you mentioned her earlier.
Yeah,
Let's talk about Martha Raye here.
He met her at the Little Shrimp. I knew her, let me see, how many years?
Well, I should explain also,
20 years
the Little
before
Shrimp was a small bar in Laguna Beach, which is part of the L.A. area, and Rudy played, I don't know how many years there. That was really his first solid gig after being a pianist at Disneyland.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but she went in there, and then we saw her after that. I used to go down and see her. But by then, she was a changed, 20 years is 20 years, and she was in her prime when I met her. And when he met her, she just was a different person, but fun people. Mm-hmm. Little drunky poo. Went with Nicky that owned what did he own down there? The Garden District. And so she got him going and got him, at that time he was a little scared to dress up in that sense, and he does it all the time.
Well, now, I would think it would be rather difficult to work in a tavern situation without drinking. I don't know. And smoking.
Well, and of course, in the old days, you had to deliver drinks. I mean, that was what you were there for, to entertain the customers, sit and talk to them, get them to buy you drinks. That was the whole philosophy. It's
kind of like Miss Kitty and Gunsmoke without the whole 9 yards, yeah. I guess. So, again, for a younger audience, Martha Raye was a very funny woman, an excellent singer, had a very wide mouth.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, in her later years, she did a commercial for one of the denture people, Polydent or something like that. And she called herself the Big Mouth. But there were very few entertainers in World War II who made as many trips with Bob Hope as Martha Raye did. I mean, she risked her life a lot to get out there where the troops were.
Yes. Yeah.
And she was a major star, but yet I'm trying to think was it just a lot of really good things she did? She had her own TV show for a while, but she was just famous, I guess, because she was everywhere, not for one big thing she did.
Yeah, I think that she worked with a lot of people. She was in a couple movies, and she worked with Bob Hope quite a bit, was on his show, did guest spots on quite a few of them. So I think she was just out there.
And she did some memorable appearances with Red Skelton.
Oh, yes.
On his TV show. She was on there a lot. I would have liked to have met Martha Raye. One of the saddest things I saw was something on the internet. They honored her with some type of military medal, and I wish they hadn't brought her out because she's in a wheelchair, completely oblivious to what was going on, and
that must have been near the end.
I didn't want to see it. Yeah, I mean, we all may be heading there, but she was such an vivacious in her career kind of person.
Slapstick comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you ever go to Europe?
I worked over there. Let me see. I worked in Thailand, and Rudy and I, was that in Bali or Jakarta? Jakarta. We worked there. And where else did we work? Oh, we did the cruise ships. I did some of those down the Danube and did those kind of things.
It's interesting to me, and I guess it's a pride factor being an American, how American music, particularly from the 30s, is not only still played so much, it is the staple of performances in Asia, in Europe. I mean, I saw a BBC performance of what they call the proms, the promenades in England they do every year, and they end them with Rhapsody in Blue, and I'm thinking, wow! And they play a lot of Copland, a lot of American classical music. Also, when these newer stars, Rod Stewart, people such as that, want to do their first legitimate album, they go back to the 30s.
Of course.
Yeah. That's when all the melodies came out. Yeah. Just a wealth of songs. What are your favorite songs?
Oh, I like Happiness Is Just a Thing Called Joe and Sunday Kind of Love. And let's see. I have a lot of...
I always thought if I had the voice for it and did late night, you'd have to do When Sunny Gets Blue and My Funny Valentine. There are probably about 10 songs that are almost mandatory if you're a cabaret singer. One More for My Baby.
Oh, I do that, yeah. And I love to do St. Louis Blues.
You know, was it Johnny Mercer wrote the lyric for that? Was it? That's the one that contains the line "A hooey"? Is that the one? "A hooey"?
No, that's
my mama done told me.
That's that one. The Blues in the Night.
Blues in the Night. It's got a hooey, hooey. Who would have written that? So that lyric? Of course, he's the one that wrote "My Huckleberry Friend" in Moon River.
Moon River.
Back a little bit as we wrap things up here, and that is, you went into real estate, and then how did you slowly get back into doing what you like best?
Well, you can't. I promised my partner when we came out here that was it. I'd give up this showbiz, but I couldn't. The ham in me would not let me. So at first we had to go out 3-4 nights a week so I could sing. Knew everybody in town. Then finally, you get yourself tapered down to where you can go once in a while. But it's something that's born in you. It's something that money can't buy. And it's an emotional release to me.
I remember interviewing Carol Channing one time, and we were talking about that, and she said, I have to perform. Mm-hmm. And then she looked at me and she said, I bet you need to announce, don't you? And I said, yeah, no, I fully understand that.
Yeah.
Whether anybody hears it or not.
Yeah, even if I'm alone sometimes,
I find myself whistling when nobody's there.
You do a good job.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So I guess I'm rehearsing all the time, but I've accidentally let tape recorders run, and I played it back, and I thought, I talk to myself, and I whistle. So that's a little dangerous.
As long as you don't answer.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yes.
Shirley, what would you say to a parent who has a child who's thinking about the arts, whether it's ballet or music or playing violin or whatever, in this era where everything is so costly and the schools don't seem to teach anything anymore? Mm-mm. What do you do?
Well, you have to hire yourself a coach that'll help them through, someone who has some experience in the business that knows people. That's the only way you're going to get anywhere. Of course, they keep saying these rappers just come up from nowhere. I don't know. It's awfully hard to say in this era where to go.
I guess if there's any good thing about the economy and electronics is that you can buy a fairly decent piano keyboard now for $150 or find one in a thrift store. Or I remember when I was in 4th grade and my mom decided I would take piano lessons, she had to use the money her dad had left her to buy a real piano. It was a spinet, so it would fit in the house, but real pianos are not cheap, but some of these little keyboards sound fine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So at least that's a little cheaper.
Yes. And there was a time I thought I could play for myself. Bought myself a piano, but I just could not. I didn't think I played well enough to accompany myself. I didn't like sitting while I wanted to be up there, so I never carried it through.
Now, that's an interesting thing you bring up, the body language of singing. Mm-hmm. I think if you're a ballad singer, you can stand in front of the microphone and move a little bit. But the kind of energy that you portray in your singing, you can't be tied down.
No.
You need to move around and hold the microphone. And I remember, I'm kind of not an expert, but an aficionado of old-time radio. And many of the older stars in radio said that even though they were in front of a microphone, if they said they were getting off a horse, they had to move their body around. You can't just stand in one place and sing some of those songs.
Right.
Did your parents live long enough to see you succeed? What did they think about your budding career?
Well, my mother and I were never good friends. First of all, I was born illegitimately. And if it hadn't been for my grandma raising me, I probably would have never gotten off the world. So when I won the state championship of Wisconsin, she said, they must have been drunk. That was her comment. So you can tell that we didn't get along too well. Mm-hmm.
So your mother was not a nurturing force in your career.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Thank God for grandparents.
Oh, yes.
And your uncle who put up with your singing.
Yes. So...
Now, I need to put one little other thing in perspective. When you were doing real estate, was it in Palm Springs or L.A.?
It was in L.A.
It was in L.A., but eventually you would move out into the desert.
Right.
And that was about how many years ago?
I've been here 8 years now.
8,
But I
okay.
had a house before that in Palm Desert.
Because from what I understand, even though Palm Springs was a hideout, if you will, for a lot of Hollywood types from the 20s, a lot of what you see if you visit the Palm Springs area, which is really about 7 cities like fingers almost, side by side by side by side, a lot of this was sand recently.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So, but when I got out here, I was in the mortgage business. By then I had got tired of working weekends, and so I had graduated in the mortgage business and owned my part of my own company. And we did mortgages, which was much more lucrative. So
Than regular real estate.
not as much work.
As a completely different topic, when did the bust start in real estate? 10 years ago, or has it been more than that?
No,
or
about
less?
4 or 5.
Because I was upstate in a medium-sized city called Merced, which was one of where my career ended. 2 things happened up there. One, the city council allowed a lot of real estate developers to broaden the scope of the city. And there was a rumor that the 10th college campus of the university system was going to be built up there, and it eventually was, and would have 30,000 students. But these developers forgot that it's going to take 30 years for it to have 30,000 students. So they overbuilt, and there are neighborhoods up there now that look like movie sets. There's nothing there.
Well, first of all, the banks are to blame for a lot of this. They kept encouraging people to refinance, get your lid, we'll give you money out of your house. And they took them up to the top. So when the market fell, they're all underwater, which isn't a fair way to go.
You know, you couldn't buy a house with the same type of arrangement, a car rather, in the same type of arrangement those people bought houses. Because in many cases, they didn't want to know if you had a job or any other source of income or any collateral. They were just throwing houses at people.
That's it.
Yeah.
Anything. Was a guy out here that came to me for a loan, and he was making $20,000 a year trying to buy a $350,000 home. I said, "What are you talking about? I wouldn't do that." You know, I threw him out.
Well, you know, there was a real estate show on the radio station where I was working, and he went to a site called Zillow, which lets you pick an address, and it will give you the approximate assessment of that property. And there was a home up in the Central Valley that was 3-bedroom, full basement, 2-bath, private garage, selling for about $260,000. And I said, I wonder what that was in my hometown, because the house my dad built in 1950 was identical, $33,000. But it's in Washington, Indiana. So it's that old location. And we said at the time that if you're a senior citizen, you should sell that home in California, take a one-time capital gains write-off, move to Indiana, put the rest of the money in the bank, and fly back to California to see your grandkids 3 times a year.
Yeah.
But those homes that were $260,000, that were mortgaged to the max, aren't worth half that now.
Oh, no.
So everybody's upside down.
Right.
So did you get out at the right time?
Yes.
Good. You
I had
saw
my
it coming?
Stroke.
Oh, that I didn't know.
I have that, and well, I'll be 80 in March.
March what?
March 14th.
Mine's the 9th.
Oh, okay. And
fellow Pisces.
Yes. And then I had the stroke. I was in March 1st to March 9th. And they were giving me a big party for my 75th. Barely got out. Said, I'm going to the party and I'm going to have a good time. And I did. And so this time I'm going to have a party. But I'm hoping that same thing doesn't happen.
No, that would be a horrible coincidence. Yes. Is there anything that you'd like to do now? Do you have a fantasy of something? I know you have had a very fulfilling career. You say that you were not on the pinnacle, but you could see the pinnacle from where you were. Is that a rewarding feeling, knowing, and it's my career is much that way. I mean, I worked in the White House on Capitol Hill, and I did all these kind of things, but I was never a star. I was there. I had a key to get in. So in a way, I don't know whether I should say, wow, I had this great career, or darn, I never quite made it.
Well, you have to make the peace inside yourself, and then you can say, I did the best I could, and I'm grateful for that, and let it go.
Well, you are one heck of a performer, Shirley,
well,
and it's nice to know you, and I look forward to seeing you perform.
Well, Rudy and I are
time.
doing a show at the Phoenix Club.
The German club
Yes.
in Anaheim?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But I can't get over there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Bald tires and no gas money.
Oh, dear.
I didn't plan well.
Well, I lost $1 million in this down thing, so 547 in the stock market, and then got in a scam, and I lost 612,000 in there.
Good heavens.
So my nephew, thank God, he inherited $3 million, and he supplements my living expenses right now.
Shirley, we had talked about Martha Ray and the time she spent in the USO clubs. A lot of performers do donate a lot of their time. What kind of charity work have you done over the years?
Oh, I've done for cancer, for AIDS, for heart disease. That's about it, I guess, those three. We worked anytime they needed us.
You mentioned AIDS charities, and I had mentioned Carol Channing before. She got in a very, very sad mood, and she said all the original Dolly boys now are gone.
Yeah. We're all AIDS victims.
Yeah.
Yes.
It just decimated a lot of the entertainers' communities.
In 1983, I sang at 100 and some funerals from the AIDS before they even knew how to take care of it and get them on medications. I lost a lot of good friends in '83.
That was a horrible year. Mm-hmm. Well, Shirley, this has been good fun, and thanks for inviting me over.
Anytime, sure.
A great entertainer in her own right, Shirley Coles, on American Montage. That's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed the interview, and I hope you'll join me next time around on American Montage. And so, a look back into the archives for my dear friend Shirley Coles. I'm Dennis Daly.